Our veterans need your support. Foxfield Farm for a Recovery Mission is a not-for-profit organization that has been established to provide an equestrian groundwork training program for U.S. veterans with PTSD and related issues incurred through military service. This curriculum will be offered at absolutely no cost to any veteran participating in the program. This foundation will also incorporate the repurposing of rescue horses and locating new, responsible owners. The synergy of the work invested by the veterans to aid the recovery of these horses is equitably therapeutic. Please go to our website to be a supporter, www.foxfieldrecoverymission.org. Thank you.
Here's your host, Sylvia.
Hello, and thank you for joining me today. We are at the offices of AARP in Hartford, Connecticut, and this is, I believe, our 5th visit here. We have a very interesting discussion today, and we're going to bring you up to date on several things that AARP has been working on over the past several months. I have as my guest Nora Duncan, our State Director for AARP, Connecticut, and also John Coates, and he is a volunteer with AARP, and it's a pleasure to be back with you again, Nora. We haven't seen you in a bit.
Thank you so much for being here. It's always nice to have you.
Great. And John, delight to meet with you.
Well, thank you for having us.
Let's start out with, let's explain what Take a Stand is about. And John, let me ask you first. Take a Stand, what the program is about, what it is involved, and your role in that.
Okay, about a year ago, AARP rolled out the Take a Stand campaign, and we are faced with the possibility that if nothing is done in making sure Social Security is around, that down the road, and in this case it's going to be in less than 20 years, people will be looking at substantially less in benefits. And in this case, it could be as much as 25% less or $10,000 a year less in benefits if efforts aren't made to make Social Security ready for the 21st century. It's been around for 80 years, and it needs to be remaining solvent so that our kids and our grandkids have something there to look forward to when they retire. So AARP started with a phase that went to primaries around the country and got our red shirts out and approached the candidates for the presidential position and said, we want to know that you're going to keep Social Security strong and take a stand. And that's been our rallying cry.
Let me just ask you here, when we say take a stand, are we looking at it as having it remain in a permanent position for all of the generations to come, or are you looking at a potential realization that perhaps a slow phase-out may happen? What has been the position on that?
Well, we're taking the position that Social Security will be around if some important changes are made in terms of making sure that the funding is there to not cut benefits. So yes, we definitely want Social Security to be there another 80 years. Let's look in the 80-year framework. So we went around to the primaries initially and went around to the different states. That was phase one. Once the candidates were in place, we entered phase two, at least in Connecticut, which obviously is where I'm involved. And we went to all of our candidates who were running for representatives, state senate, and we did a face-to-face with them and said, we want you to take a stand on keeping Social Security strong. But what's important is, with the amount of lip service and the amount of gridlock that has been in place in Washington, we don't want them to just say, yes, we're for Social Security. It's more or less like saying, I like children and small dogs.
Yes.
We want them to be specific and get more specific as time goes by. So we said, will you support keeping Social Security strong? And we got a thumbs up because all of the candidates we approached in Connecticut said yes, and AARP established a link to their websites and said yes. For instance, John Larson is in favor of keeping Social Security strong.
Yes, he's been very supportive of that.
And so at the same time, we went to public events and again with our red shirts, we have high visibility, and talked to the public and got them to sign petitions if they would. And these petitions were sent down to Washington, and wanted to emphasize to people, because there's a wide variety of fears and apprehension, especially when you talk to younger people. It seems like almost all the young people I talk to, and some of the events had predominantly young people, oh, it's not going to be there for us. Well, we're saying, yes, it's going to be there for you.
As long as you support it and make your voice heard.
As long as the changes that are necessary to keep it funding and keep it solvent are undertaken now. And since it is a long-term proposition, we are saying we would like to see legislation next year be introduced in 2017, and by 2020, hopefully have some meaningful financial safeguards in.
And resolutions to how to handle. Well, let me ask you, Nora, on the larger picture, or I guess just so we present this so that people understand it clearly. This is not a free program, or it's a government program by which you're actually, and I use the word force, but what you're doing is that people who are working have money taken out and put into this kitty, and you hope it's not robbed for something else, and then the government contributes some amount towards that. Now, is that the correct picture?
Yeah. I mean, it's often, Social Security is often mischaracterized as an entitlement program. There's nothing entitlement about the fact that when I got my first paycheck when I was 14, when you could actually work when you were 14, I started paying Social Security. Right? And as did you, as did John. That's not, I'm getting back what I've paid in. Obviously, there are formulas here, and I'm not an actuary, so don't ask me to get into those. But you know, employers pay in, employees pay in. You know, it's a savings account in that respect.
Of course.
And
it's like a healthcare account.
Yeah, it's not like, you know, I put in $5, I get $5 back, but that's what we anticipate. And across the board, and everyone we've spoken to in my 4.5 years here, people believe they should be able to take out if they have put in.
Yes.
And that's the promise. And that's the promise we're really trying to secure for the 21st century. This is not a program where you are low income and you receive dollars for that, or that you're high income and you receive a tax break because of that. This is an everybody tool. And the fact of the matter is, without some choices and some attention to this, some difficult choices probably in many cases, without a very specific look and concentrated effort by our next president and the upcoming Senate and the House in DC.
And what their positions will be on it.
We have to face this now. We cannot wait like we tend to do in U.S. politics until the crisis is upon us, which is what they just did with Social Security
disability. Because then you have to knee-jerk react, and you might make a bad decision.
Yeah, let's be planful. Let's have discussions, and let's have these discussions separate and apart from defense, from the Farm Bill, from all these other things that are not related and are not the same thing, right? They're not that we all put in and we expect that we should be able to get out.
Well, I think the big question here is, I mean, the question is that in order to have Social Security, and it looks like a no-brainer. You have a job, you have some taken out, you get used to that. Your parents were used to it. You find out that it's very useful later in life. It seemed very boring at the time. Oh, look how much got taken out. But then later on, it pays off. It's a no-brainer because it is your money, and then maybe a little interest has been added, but it was your money. It did stay there for all that time, and it would seem as though, why would anybody not have it go on? And then someone says, oh, but what about the people who didn't have a regular job? What about the people who had some part-time jobs, and they didn't have permanent jobs, and they didn't? Because it doesn't seem to be the culture anymore to stay at the XYZ company and continue to work there for many years and build up your kitty. It's job, jump from job to job, and and maybe have a part-time job, or maybe your hours have been cut.
But those folks are still paying in.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Now, they may not be paying into the same level as someone who's higher income and maybe in a more stable position, but they're still paying in, and there is a
and they're going to get their part that they put in.
Yeah.
They're not going to
Yeah.
get the same as someone else who has had
And I mean,
full-time.
we have to remember why Social Security started, and this may be controversial now.
Yes.
But it was a program to keep the elderly population at the time, which are much younger than they are now in terms of lifespan, out of absolute poverty.
Right.
That's really what it has continued to be in many cases, unfortunately. We don't have a society where everyone was able to save and everyone has a pension. And Social Security is an incredibly important part of keeping people out of poverty. And in a state like Connecticut, where property taxes can be high even if you own your home.
Right.
If you're bringing in $1,200 a month and you have a $7,000, $8,000 property tax bill,
Right.
And that's your only source of income, there's a lot of difficult decisions being made there. And those folks can't take a 25% cut.
Right,
And,
exactly.
And you know what? And the generations, the millennials who are paying in deserve the same opportunities that the boomers have. And we really just need to have our leaders, our newly elected leaders, and our returning incumbents to say, we will take a leadership position on this.
Yeah.
And we're not all going to agree.
Yeah.
But we need to get somewhere.
Right, right. Now, John, if you were to put your finger to the wind, how do you feel that when you went to speak to everybody, you're wearing your red shirts, did you make an impression?
Yes, I think so. First of all, AARP does carry clout, and we weren't just being given lip service, because from the people, the general public that we've talked to at some of these events, there's fear out there, there's concern, even since the election last week. Some people are saying, well, are we going to get rid of Social Security? Are we going to privatize it? AARP is against the privatization, and we were going to fight for keeping this program strong. But because of demographic changes, the workforce is changed in terms of sexual mix, and we have more baby boomers collecting Social Security, and there's less people entering the workforce.
Exactly.
These challenges are coming up, and usually we don't seem to do anything unless we're forced to, but the fact is 15, 18 years is not that far away when these drastic cuts
very quickly.
are going to happen, especially with how long it takes to get things done. So our feeling is certainly cautiously optimistic, but with so many things that have to be done in Washington in a very short time, if we don't start our next phase, which is pushing for this legislation with all of our might, then these 18 years will go by a lot quicker than you'd care to believe. So.
Yeah, because I think the last 3 or 4 years, I think it's been flat. Is that right? And this year there's a 1% increase. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, I think you are. I'd have to go back and look at exactly.
Okay.
But there was just a small COLA,
Yes.
and there has been concerns in the past about no COLA.
Right, so those are your red flags.
yeah.
The thing, up 1%, okay, fine. What about some voter demographics? What have you seen with regard to that,
Well,
John?
in terms of
different
in
turnout,
Connecticut,
bigger turnout? What?
well, bigger turnout in terms of
More people who seem to be involved in wanting to know the issues and having a say in it. Do you see older people really
certainly when
getting
you're talking
involved
about people my age,
Yes.
they're very attuned to it.
Yes.
What's sort of frightening is we used to have three legs to the retirement situation. You had a pension,
Right.
you had your own savings, and you had Social Security. Pensions are pretty much gone in private industry now.
That's a pretty special package if you get one of those.
And we've been pushing for a retirement savings program that we'll talk about shortly. And Social Security is a very large portion of the total income that a substantial portion of Connecticut
and maybe
people,
the only thing, because people haven't put any money aside.
For in
on it.
excess of 50%, it
Right.
virtually is everything that they've got coming in. And for like up to 75% of the people, it represents more than 50% of their income. So, the people who are close to retirement are very attuned to this and very for keeping this going. What we have to do is sell the younger people, saying it's going to come sooner than you think. So we're wanting to fight for you. And
yes. Well, that leads us actually to our kind of a segue as to, you know, if Social Security is your only means and it is the only thing and you don't have an extended family who can help you with that, then we talk about quality of life. We talk about, you know, aging population, what kinds of support do we have there, those people who need additional Medicare assistance and so forth. So I think it's a natural route for us to go. It's very important. You've been doing a lot of work. You've put hours into this. Well vested, I think, and certainly has been part of AARP's program for a long time.
Medicare and Social Security remain fundamental to our work in Washington, D.C.
Yes.
And every state office of AARP and their volunteers and their members have been active. And, you know, I would say this, which, you know, we asked about demographics. I went to Trump rallies as an AARP representative, and everybody, you'd think there'd be animosity possibly based on what we've seen in this election cycle, interested in talking about the issue.
Well, that's good. Well, we need to move on to our next guest.
Absolutely.
Marilyn Diaz. She's another AARP volunteer. So, John, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
I enjoyed speaking with you, and we will be back in a moment with our next guest.
Thank you.
And we are back with our second guest today. It is Marilyn Diaz. She is also an AARP volunteer. It's a pleasure to have you here today, Marilyn.
Thank you so much for having me.
And Nora and you, there's something called the LEG session, L-E-G, 2017.
Ledge,
so,
yeah.
Ledge,
the ledge
okay,
session.
I think I normally just read
Legislative,
leg. All right, legislative session.
Sometimes you feel like you had your leg chewed off when you're over there by the time it's done.
But gets pretty physical out there. All right, so let's talk about that session. What is that about, Marilyn?
Well, for us, in terms of what we're speaking here today, one of the main things that we're talking about is the Work and Save program. And last year, AARP was extremely successful in working locally with businesses and others and getting a program passed, which will enable individuals to start saving for their retirement. Because as my colleague said in your earlier session, there's 3 legs to that retirement. Social Security, which is vital importance. Pensions, which unfortunately are going by the wayside. And then your own savings. And unfortunately, people are not saving. It is known, however, that if people are afforded the opportunity to save through their work program, almost like Social Security, that they will have a tendency to, in fact, do so. Personally, I know that you can go crazy trying to figure out all the different vehicles, whether it's a Roth IRA or whether you should invest with a broker, who's your financial advisor. So what this program is about is enabling individuals to save through their work. It applies to any employer who has 5 or more employees, and employees will be able to will automatically be enrolled in the program. They have the opportunity to opt out. 3% of their salary will be put into that savings, and I know that when you don't see the money, it comes right out of your paycheck, it makes it so much less painful. But people have got to save for their retirement. Social Security, even if it stays as it is not enough for a person to survive. It really isn't.
Well, when you talk about the Work and Save program, so who are you speaking to? You're educating employees, or you're speaking to the employers, or where are you putting the pressure?
We're educating everyone. Okay. First, the battle last year was with our local, the legislative session, and getting them, which again we were very successful in doing. We're one of 4 states, and I'm so proud of Connecticut, I'll tell you, because Connecticut was one of the first. So we were successful in making that happen, and what is happening this year is that they're actually implementing the legislation, putting together the vehicle, which in turn will become effective for employees on January 1st of 2018. So your original question is, who are we talking to? Well, we're talking to employers, we're talking to employees. They must know that this is a vehicle that they will have open to them. We're talking to employers who may be, in fact, afraid of, well, what does this really mean to me? And quite frankly, for me, it's important to talk to those small businesses who have the 5 employees or less to make them comfortable to know that this is a program that they can participate and must participate in.
Sure. So I guess the question would be, when you're talking to the employers, it obviously gives their profile a better profile. We're involved in this, and when you come to work for me, and they can attract good workers and people with the right skill set that they need because they have this program in place. Cost involved to them? Is there a cost for an employer?
Part of what is built into this whole year of establishing it is to, in fact, train employers or make them aware of how to implement this program. And right now, quite frankly, it's similar to like when you check off for taking out your Social Security or your federal income tax. It'll be similar to that. However, the legislature did recognize, and there was a lot of feedback from employers and employees, that in fact there may be a learning curve, and they've in fact filtered into that. There's going to be a website, there's going to be informational material, and much assistance provided to those employers to facilitate the implementation.
If you actually, go ahead,
Oh,
Nora,
I was going to say, the thing to know about this is that there is no employer contribution required.
Right,
Absolutely.
and is there a cost in just paperwork or keeping,
the answer to that
managing it?
is if you are a company that is using a payroll service or QuickBooks or anything like that, no, really not.
Okay.
Some of our large payroll companies have indicated that for 90% of their customers, it really will be nothing. It's just another box to fill.
Sure.
And QuickBooks and those kind of programs change with state laws.
Right.
So that would be automated.
Yeah.
And a couple of cents here or there, but there's no requirement to contribute. It's only a requirement that you give the deduction.
Yeah. So it's a plus really for everybody.
And there's 600,000 people in Connecticut right now who do not have access to workplace savings. So I am lucky enough to work for a company that provides me with some contributions, and I'm able to add in my own. I do that.
Right.
This will allow someone who's never had that opportunity to contribute to an IRA style. It's actually an IRA, a Roth IRA for now. But this whole thing in the implementation process, a request for proposal has to be built. That request for proposal will go out. There's a board that's forming that will operate all of that. And a company, pick any of the big retirement companies that come to mind that advertise, could win the bid, and they will be the ones who establish and will set basis points. There's a 75 basis points cap, so that folks who would not ordinarily be able to go out and afford to open up their own, and only about 4.5% of people who do not have payroll deduction actually ever walk in to a financial institution and open up their own savings program. And those institutions do not court these people because they are not profitable as a single. But when you pull them together, you take those 600,000 people that we estimate will benefit from this. When you pull them, they become profitable for companies that want to bid on the business.
Sure,
and
of course.
Becomes a benefit to the state of Connecticut because generations will now start to save. They will become less reliant.
Becomes habitual.
It'll become less reliant on some of the programs that we have that subsidize people who are low income. People don't want to have to rely on that. People are proud to have their own savings. But for a lot of folks, that's just out of reach right now, and we are trying to make sure it's not, so that we at least allow for that second leg of the stool if you don't have a pension. And I think it does make Connecticut more competitive with surrounding states, especially on the border.
Absolutely.
Because if you're the guy who, I don't know, you're the tire company. You're the tire company right over the border. You're the tire company here. I live equal distance. Am I going to go work for the guy that I get more opportunity with?
Absolutely.
I mean, our goal overall is to pass this in every state. But right now, I think it's a competitive advantage that won't cost employers anything and only benefits their employees.
Right,
and
well,
that's why it's so important. I'm so glad you said that. The fact that it does not cost the employer does not have to contribute to this. Rather, what they're doing is providing another benefit. Like as you said earlier, it just makes them more attractive. It really,
All right,
is.
so let's ask an executional thing.
Let me just, if you're already doing this as a company, you're complying with the law already.
Oh, right.
And if you don't want to go into that pool I talked about, go ahead and get the other small businessmen at the Chamber of Commerce that you met. And that's okay.
Yeah.
You just have to comply with the law. You don't have to comply with the program that the state will RFP out.
Right.
You can comply on your own if you find that to be something you're not interested in.
Right.
And if you're already doing it,
yeah,
no worries.
You're
You're
on.
done.
What happens if you're moving job to job? That whole IRA thing just moves with you, and then you hope that the next job has one of these.
It has to if
has
it's
to if
5 or
it's
more
passed.
employees. And you,
Okay.
yes, so it's your individual IRA, and it will go with you. So you own that. It's portable.
Yep.
And it can go with you from job to job. And you can, if you have 2 jobs, they can both contribute to the same one. So
It doesn't
it's
seem to me as though there's any reason why you wouldn't want to, frankly.
I think people are afraid
it's
that
another
they can't afford it.
no-brainer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
so-
we're going to try to make sure that people don't opt out. And that's part of our educational campaign is the don't opt out.
Right.
And then trying to make sure employers understand
Yeah.
what we are up to and getting this whole thing through in a timely process.
Well, Marilyn, you also have been working on this paid family and medical leave, too. So tell us where you are with that.
Again, I'm very proud of the state of Connecticut that, in fact, it has in place the Medical Leave Act, which is extremely important for those caregivers out there who are attending to their children, their parents, their brothers, their sisters, their family, and had the threat looming over them that if they had to take time off from their work, that they may in fact lose their job. I mean, what a crisis is that? When you're already in the middle of a crisis and dealing with someone near and dear to you who needs a lot of time, that you could possibly lose your job. Well, again, yay Connecticut, kudos to us that the Medical Leave Act is in place. Now we're taking it a step further. We want that to be a paid family leave act so that, again, individuals are not threatened with the possible loss of their job, but that loss of income too. So the Paid Family Leave Act is one of our priorities for this year that we've been working on, and just like what we did for the Work and Save program, we're going to be working closely with the legislature to educate and say this is a possibility, this is something that can be in fact be done, and we need it to happen.
Is there a ceiling on the amount of time that, you know, if you have to have paid medical leave, is there going to be a certain amount of time they'll pay up to here, and then there are rules to that? I mean, what are the parameters of the program?
So there are time parameters and there are wage cap parameters. So this is all proposals that have come and gone. There have been recommendations. So there's actually no piece of legislation active right now. As we enter the legislative session in January of 2017, we'll start to see proposals bubble up. But this, in fact, that we've worked on in the past is there's definitely caps.
Right.
I sometimes compare it to unemployment.
Yes.
You know, not everybody uses it, but when you need it, it's there. But, you know, you're never going to get more than that $5.50 a week or whatever it's set at now. And there's a time constraint on it. But it does offer opportunity for people to not have to make the choice between the person they love and the job they need.
Right.
And these things are all going to be discussed more. What this looks like, what the program looks like in the end, if there is one. What we might have to do as a state to get there.
Right.
So it's up in the air to some degree, but we're really committed to the fact that workplace flexibility is necessary so that caregivers in our position at AARP, when you're caring for yourself, if you become ill, or you're caring for a loved one, that you don't have to make these tough decisions, because for the average man who has to leave his job to care for someone, it's about $275,000 worth of lost income over the course of their lifetime, and it's a little less for women because of our wage gap.
Right.
But I mean, we're talking, you know, upwards of $200,000 to $300,000 of lost pay put into retirement savings that people would be able to get back, Social Security contributions. It's really a terrible thing to have to choose between.
It's an emotional drain. Well, we plowed through these subjects very quickly, but I think what we want to point out is AARP is at the forefront.
We try to
people, and I really think that we need to look at AARP as it's usually 55 and up.
50.
But what you're 50 and
50
up,
and
all
up,
right.
yep.
And we want to point out the fact, if you are a member, still $16 a year. Is that right?
Well, yeah.
And that
Various,
includes your spouse.
It includes your spouse.
Your spouse, and you get your magazine, and you get up to date. But more importantly, even if you're not 50, it's planning towards that time when you will be 50.
Absolutely.
And more important. So, Marilyn, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so very much. It was a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure.
Thank you
All
so much, Susan.
All right, take care. So, I'd like to remind our viewers that you can actually go to the AARP website, which is www.aarp.org, and remind you that we are on Facebook, and you can see all of our programs on our website at ctvalleyviews.com. This is Susan Regan. Thank you for joining me and bringing proof to the people.
I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me, and I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today.